An economist claims corporate watchdog ASIC is only investigating a tiny proportion of complaints it receives. John Adams was an advisor to Liberal Senator Arthur Sinodinos and says the percentage of complaints that are investigated is less than 1%. ASIC disputes that figure. Joining me now is business reporter Dan Ziffer. Dan, g'day. So first off, explain for us exactly what ASIC does and how many complaints they receive and what they do about it.
So ASIC is the conduct regulator for Australian business. They're meant to keep everyone on the straight and narrow. They're called the Australian Securities and Investments Commission. So essentially, if you're a registered company or a listed company in Australia, you are under their remit. They look after you, they run the corporate laws. Now, they receive around 10,000 complaints in an average year, and they say that about 35% of them are kind of investigated further. Many of them lack evidence or they're not in the correct jurisdiction. Some of them are resolved with, say, a letter warning the company or further action. This analysis that has come from economist John Adams takes in a much broader remit of reports to ASIC. It takes in things like self-confessed breach reports from companies, where companies say themselves that they've broken the law, liquidators reports from people who have financial services licenses. And what that does, that creates a much larger number of complaints. And when you divide that by the amount that actually go through to a full investigation, where ASIC really undertakes to work out whether something has gone wrong, you're looking at less than 1%. That obviously has a big impact because investigations and prosecutions have a real deterrent effect. It's not just that they punish the person that has done something wrong, they deter other people from doing the wrong thing. So it's fine to have laws, but without enforcement of them, without investigation of them, and without prosecution of cases in particular industries, there is essentially a magnetic effect where more people realise there's less of a problem with breaking these laws and there's more of an inducement to do it.
So go into a bit more detail for us on what this analysis shows.
So this analysis shows that if you include all of the reports, not just the around 10,000 that come from the public every year, but also from self-confession, breach reports, from liquidators, auditors, and other people who hold financial services licenses, once you divide that by the number of actual investigations, actual things that go on to be investigated, you're looking at, from complaints down to investigations, less than 1%. Now, ASIC uses a different methodology. They basically say they have an assessment process, and that what Mr. Adams is talking about is a full active investigation that might end in a prosecution. So either way, what you are seeing is that there are vastly more complaints than ASIC does take to full investigation. And there's a reason for that. It's really complicated, and they have, in some ways, a very difficult case to prove. Now, one of the most recent examples was that ASIC dropped action against 10 unnamed senior executives and board members of Crown Resorts. From watching this program, you'd know in the past few years, a huge swirl of problems of law breaking and allegations of criminal and breaches of civil law in various inquiries and royal commissions. But ASIC didn't progress with an investigation into 10 unnamed senior executives and board members, basically because they didn't think they would be successful at prosecution. ASIC is currently investigating the Star, and they're not updating that investigation, but they have been looking at them for 6 months. But to give you a sense of how difficult it is, John Adams, the economist who has done this analysis, did successfully submit a complaint to ASIC about a financial issue. It is being investigated. But he's an economist, and the complaint was 600 pages long. Right. That's simply not something most consumers can do if they get into trouble with the business.
And so ASIC has lost its top leadership in recent years. What's been happening at that top level?
It's been messy, would be the kindest thing you could say. ASIC was really exposed, along with a lot of other Australian regulators, in the Banking Royal Commission as being cowed and unable to really take on large institutions. In one excruciating example, ASIC was actually emailing words and text to a bank about a press release that they were going to put out about something the bank had done wrong. And they were seeking approval from the bank about the press release they were going to put out. You know, it was a really weird and terrible state of affairs. They since muscled up, promised to do better, and basically said rather than doing cosy deals, they would essentially ask themselves, why not litigate? But in recent years, their chair, James Shipton, their deputy chair, Daniel Crennan, both left their jobs due to complications around their expenses. There's no indication either of those men did anything wrong, but an inquiry was going on about how they were paid. They didn't want it to drag out, so they left. Subsequently, we had the COVID pandemic, and the government of the time decided that it didn't want an aggressive regulator when we're trying to get the economy back on track. So it forced ASIC to essentially drop that why not litigate stance and to take a more conciliatory approach to business. So huge turnover at the top for ASIC, always a vexed space with how they choose to take on particular issues and choose to leave others alone.
Okay, we might have to leave that there. Dan Ziffer in Melbourne. And if you want to see more on this story, you can go to abc.net.au/news.